I'm assuming you have a lot of followers from India.
Yes.
You know why they love what you write?
Tell me.
In India, we love to ask this question कि we have this really complex question. एक 4 point बता दो important, and which is what you do very well. I thought I'll just do a little warm-up session because I'm little hyper. I have not slept last night, and I'm on caffeine, so I'm just like. So I just started doing my own version of AMA, and I realized that most people are not from CRED. It's always good to have people. This is the second session we are doing with people outside CRED coming for CRED Curious. The first session we did was with Julie. She used to be at Facebook and now building Sundial. She used to be head of design along with Chandra. I don't know if you know him,
Yep.
who was the head of data science. Uh, Shreyash, why don't we do one thing? Let's do a quick intro to your journey, because a lot of people only follow you on Twitter and may not necessarily know about the journey. We're not very curious people, so many people have not gone to your LinkedIn and looked it up. So why don't you give us a 2 minute intro?
Happy to do that. I have a question for you before that. Where were you last night?
I was watching the World Cup
I see. Where were you watching the World Cup?
in the stadium.
what was what was it like?
I was just telling everybody over here, it's like this 90,000 people become one, and they have the same expressions and same chants and same body language, and and there is suddenly everybody is just hugging each other and happy with each other, and they get this feeling of, I think there was oxytocin flowing through, and seeing that at scale, it was almost like going to a safari, right? Like you see animals in large herds behave in a certain way, but in a human form, which is otherwise supposed to be like this only rational and uh, s- like tweet properly type of people. But when you go over there, like everybody is just behaving um, absolutely in their childish versions and getting excited. So it was fascinating for me. It was a good product experience.
So let's see. I was born in Mumbai, India, and for the first 21 years of my life, I pretty much stayed within a 100-kilometer radius of where I was born. So maybe once or twice I went outside of that allowed radius, but pretty much just my experience in childhood growing up was all centered around the city I was born in. And then the very first time I even got on a plane was to go to Los Angeles to do my graduate studies. So at age 21, I went to University of California at Irvine to do my PhD. And within 1 month of that, of being in university to pursue my PhD in computer science, I realized this is not for me. I just cannot deal with academia. And so I decided within 1 month of joining university, I was starting to find ways to leave university. Uh, and ultimately, I kind of graduated with a master's in 2001, which was not a good time uh, to get out of school over in the US. If people think that the recession right now seems bad, like it's not at all. Like you have no idea what 2001 was like. And so I decided to graduate, and I was looking for jobs. I eventually found jobs as employee number 3 of our startup. No, yeah, employee number 2 of our startup. I quit that job in 1 week, so I don't even list it on my resume. Then I joined as employee number something of a startup and left that job in 6 months. Then I joined another startup as employee number 3, left that one in 7 months, and I was all doing software engineering. So I did software engineering for about 5 years, 5, 6 years. After which I transitioned to product management. And my first real product management job was at Yahoo during its better days. And then since then, I've worked at various places, Google, Twitter, and most recently at Stripe. And have been very lucky to work on really fun products, and usually worked on kind of 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 1 to 20 types of products. Even when I was in larger organizations, I was always focused on working on new initiatives and making early initiatives highly successful. Also worked on some mature products, but really enjoy the early stage more. And then yeah, last year I decided to start a new chapter in my career, which is instead of doing one of those operating product management roles, I decided that I want to do advising, and now I'm even doing teaching. And so I teach one course. I'm going to launch a few other courses next year. But it's been really fun the last 1.5, almost 2 years now. And then lastly, I think a lot of you may have seen some of my writings, and I get questions sometimes about like, so how did you do that? I want to share with you, and I'll stop there with the intro, that that whole thing of me writing on Twitter and other places, complete accident. I basically started doing it because of COVID. So when COVID happened, there was a shutdown, lockdown. I had 2 extra hours in the day, 2 extra hours in the day, because I did not have to commute anymore. So I said, okay, how should I use these hours? And I decided, let me just start writing down things that I've learned over the years, things that I've used in my work for many years, things that I've mentored and coached other people on my team and broader kind of companies I worked at. And that's really how it started. So there was no kind of grand plan. There was no strategy. There was no kind of goal of becoming a creator. I still don't think about myself like that. But it's been really fun. It's been really fun to see how it resonates with people, get a lot of kind of messages from people, how it's helped them. So really fun, but I did want to share that it was a complete accident.
I'm assuming you have a lot of followers from India.
Yes.
You know why they love what you write?
Tell me.
In India, we love to ask this question कि we have this really complex question. एक 4 point बता दो important. And which is what you do very well. You and I have noticed people don't really understand because you are writing your best to explain those 4 points, but it may not be limited to those 4 points, right? And in India, we love these extraordinary shortcuts and versus going deeper into topics.
So let me ask you this. At what point does that start getting old for a person? Right? This idea of like I posted and I got a bunch of likes and retweets and the world loves me, and yeah, there's some haters, but the world loves me. How does one reach a point where you feel that immense power and influence, but then you also recognize how it is corrupting you inside?
It's fascinating, right? If you meet a teenager, they are enjoying every day. They have party plans for the weekend set up, everything is set up. What they crave for is purpose in life. What am I doing with life? What is going to happen to my life? Like they have insecurity of that. People who have purpose in their life, they are like, what am I doing? I don't even go out. I don't even have a time to go and watch football. Like, what am I doing with my life? Uh, and the the truth is, you need to do both in certain proportions based on what stage of life you are in. And therefore, you see the classic middle age crisis kick in. It's like, what did I earn this money for? And then suddenly you see 40-year-old getting like super bikes or sports cars, which is not for their age, but it's for their budgets. And I think people are constantly, so it doesn't end. The ratio of this keeps changing. And if you maintain them equally well, then you can continue for a very long period of time. But if you go swing too much, then you will swing hard in another direction as well.
I'll share one idea that worked for me as I was going through my own little journey of like, posting on social media and getting a lot of validation, getting a lot of likes. And I think this was like maybe in month 3. So when COVID started, that's when I started tweeting. So that was whatever, March of 20, what year was it? 2020? Yeah, it doesn't matter. But I think I distinctly remember around June of 2020, I posted something, and then I was just like waiting for like, where are the likes? Where are the retweets? And then I asked myself, like, what are you doing? And somehow, the thought occurred that when it comes to this kind of activity, right, posting on social media, if it feels good, it is not good for you. Okay? I have no idea where that thought came from. But then I started thinking about that. Yeah, if it feels good, then it is not good for you. And by the way, this realization doesn't fix anything. You still crave that kind of validation. But whenever I see that craving, I try to remember this, that I'm not supposed to feel good.
There is an interesting theory which is regressing to your audience. If you start doing stuff that will get you more likes, the quality of content will be no different than what they would write. And therefore, this is something I realized because I tweet largely with the intent, notes to myself. And therefore, after I tweet, I don't even check who replied what. And therefore, people are like, oh, you never respond to responses. I will sometimes go and just check if there are interesting responses, if people have given an interesting counterpoint. But most of the good people don't tweet back. They DM you or they'll WhatsApp you and they'll bring their points privately. That's an interesting one. The drive to please the audience, unless your intent is to just manipulate them, corrupts you. I'll tell you, easy way to understand is that look at the content that Instagram influencers post. And you will see that the quality will drop to a point where it is sort of vulgar. Because if you look at the videos that got viral, accidentally did that, and therefore now they have reinforced that if I do this a little bit more, and then suddenly it becomes a trend. And I think, but the thing is then everybody's doing it, so again you lose your edge. So what do you do next? And therefore we go through these interesting waves where we were super interested in following somebody, they're like, oh shit, they are so boring, now we don't want to follow them anymore. And I think that trends continue, and we are all living through these momentary nature of being a celebrity and playing that game. I'm going to switch tracks and ask you another question. You put a poll out there that to be absolutely the best in something, is it something that you're born with, or it's about hard work? What was the third and fourth option?
Natural talent.
Getting help from others. And what was the fourth one?
Hard work, passion, help from others.
Help from others. Okay. So you know the options are to be really good at something. It is something that you're born with, you're passionate about, you are hardworking, or you get help from others. I want to get this audience to poll as well. How many of you believe it is you're born with?
Oh, and just a qualification. What is the most important factor? Because it's easy to say, you know, like, yeah, it's all of the above, right? Like, that's a cop-out. So which of these is the most important factor?
So you're born with it, passionate, hardworking, and getting help from others. How many for born with it? Or naturally innate? Okay, two, three people. Five, six. Okay. How many for passion? Okay, very passionately raised hands. Um, how many of you believe in getting help from others? Okay, decent chunk. How many of you believe it is hard work? This is not as bad as your Twitter poll. You saw it's a very balanced
Yeah.
audience. Give your views, and I'll give my views too. Because you definitely did not expect this answer. You expected, but I'm sure you asked this poll for a reason.
So yeah, whenever I ask this question, whether it's a poll or something else, the most popular answer is hard work, passion, help from others. I'll just share my own story with this, and also I want to clarify: this is the question is qualified to be world class at something. Okay, which of these is the most important factor? And we can talk later about whether anybody needs to be world class or whatever. But for the sake of this conversation, right, there is probably one or two areas where I feel like I'm world class, and it's been a long journey to get there. And there's a story I can share with you about how I got there. And that story will involve a lot of hard work. It will involve a lot of study. It will involve a lot of passion. It will involve a lot of struggle, a lot of fears, nights when I couldn't sleep because I was anxious or stressed about things. It might even involve a disturbing childhood, like challenges I faced growing up and disadvantages I had. And if I told you this story, what would you believe about me? Odds are you'd believe that, oh, Shreyas, he's a self made man, whatever that means. And he had this drive and this passion, and he worked so hard, and he did this, right? That's the story I told myself for many, many years until I became a parent. And becoming a parent is fun, especially for somebody like me, because I'm always evaluating, like, what am I doing here? Why is this happening? You know, why am I saying something and there's this emotional reaction to it, like, which is completely illogical? My son is 14 years old, so teenage years are difficult. And the conclusion I have reached is that the biggest factor actually, so the conclusion I've reached is the story I would tell you about this, even though it's compelling, I'm fooling myself first. And by telling you this story, I'm inadvertently fooling you all. Because in my view, and I'll share with you the journey exactly, like when I was thinking about this topic, I started asking myself, where does this tendency of working hard come from? Like, what makes me work hard? What makes me uncompromising about product quality? What makes me really great at understanding what users want? Right, and just as an example, like, this is a talent I've had, which is, say there's some problem we're trying to solve and somebody says, oh, good, let's go talk to users. And imagine, like, you know, like the two parallel universes. In one universe, I'm that product manager who's asked, like, go talk to users. Another universe, there's somebody else, some other product manager. Usually, if it's a complicated problem, this other product manager will take months or at least weeks to talk to users. They'll do the research, survey, recruitment, all of that. They'll compile answers, they'll add some weights, scores, etc. And they'll come up with like, okay, based on all these user conversations, this is what we need to do. So it took a bunch of weeks, right? Since for however long I can remember, I've been able to do this exact thing within a matter of minutes usually. Right? I've just been able to figure out like what needs to happen. Now, I do talk to users, and that's a separate topic, but the point is that the same conclusion, or not even the same conclusion, a demonstrably worse conclusion is reached by this like fairly competent product manager in a matter of weeks and months that I can reach within often minutes or hours or days. What explains that? I asked myself that question. And it turns out my answer to this is it's natural talent. Ultimately, a lot of these things I did not choose. You know, how many of you have children? Okay, keep your hands raised if you have 2 children or more. Okay, so there's a few. For those of you who don't have children, like one of the common things you'll find as a parent is you have 2 or 3 children, and each of them is different, like very different. Right? I'm extremely different from my brother, and we grew up in the same environment. We have approximately, the same genes and everything. Why is he very different from me? Why does he not have this talent, right? Because it kind of was ingrained in me, right? Like it's basically an accident. And the same for hard work, right? Like there's some people who can't work hard, right? There's some people who don't have the drive, right? So ultimately, a lot of this like requires that natural talent, right? Now, I'll share one last thing, and then, Kunal, I'm curious what your reaction is and what your thoughts are. But why do people believe? Why do people believe? Most of us here said hard work, passion, help from others. Why do we say that? Why do we believe that? Well, let's think about it, right? Like, the reason we believe that is because we are told to believe that. And the second reason we believe that is because we want to believe that. Right? So imagine that I'm an author. I imagine I want to write books about being world class. Right? If I wanted to write a book about world class people, about being world class, and my goal is to sell more copies, many copies of this book, what conclusion should I draw you towards about what it takes to be world class? Any thoughts? What if I want to write a book and attribute a core reason for how people become world class? And if my goal is to sell many books, what is the logical reason I should provide for that? Yes. Yes, so the answer was that everyone can be world class. And how can I make you believe that?
Grit.
Right? Grit, hard work. My thesis in this book will be, if you work hard enough, you can also be Sachin Tendulkar. If you work hard enough, you can also be Elon Musk or Bill Gates or whatever, or Quentin Tarantino or Larry David.
I'm going to double click on this, Shreyas. I think this is a controversial topic for a reason.
And we are only discussing controversial topics today.
Yeah,
that's the one thing we have decided.
Agreed theme. Now, this is thing that you see that, oh, but this guy was not so good. He became good later on. Like, they worked hard and all of that is fine. I think the question is about being world class. And I think I've come to a conclusion that, there are some people born with some use cases and they're really, really good at it. Right? And I think a lot of times I think that you should just use these people like APIs, that, oh, they are going to be good for consumer judgment. So don't try to be good at this. Just ask this guy ki chalega kya nahi chalega. And I think creative fields do that really, really well. Right? They'll go into a big music director, sir, ye gana chalega, bolte haan ye chalega. Before the release. And you know, the stakes are so high because you release a movie or it's a hit or a death. So you're not like, oh, A/B test karte movie. Imagine RRR with A/B testing. Four releases come and then third day we are going to change all the thing, and there is no such thing. So therefore, people with high judgment, and high judgment is a function of, if you ask them, how do you know this song is going to work? They can't explain. A lot of times I would have hypotheses on data that I have not spent time on, and I can't explain why do I know this, because you just think in a certain way. And I've seen that in investors as well. Just get it right more consistently. I've had the fortune to meet Mike Moritz, and the guy is a history author. Like he's written about history, and the way he thinks and explains, he will articulate, and you'll be like mesmerized at their articulation, and they just know why WhatsApp is going to work. And I had the fortune of working at Sequoia for a while, and I read some of these memos written before the companies became successful, and I was read that, I was like, this guy saw everything. There is no way you could predict a app's journey and adoption behavior unless you know something differently, and the alpha doesn't come from common knowledge. So there is something that is going on, and I believe in this natural gift thing. For example, it's very hard for some people to be rigorous. For example, if you give me, like, till 5 years ago, I used to every year make a decision that I'm going to have a checklist and to-do list, and that's it. Game's over for everybody now. And the first person who's been missing from that next day on that is me. Like, I just can't do that. But a lot of people are driven with that, and they function so beautifully with that. And I wish I can just hire all of them, uh, because they are great to complement with me, right? Because I'm going to be super unstructured. Uh, I have somebody who's more unstructured than me at work, Harish. Is Harish still here?
Way to call it out.
Yeah. He heads our design, and we've now been 10 plus years working together between free charge, CRED, and multiple things. And we used to just fight early days because we could not agree on anything. And now we are just like, I know certain things, and there is an interesting understanding. We still fight, by the way, but we have an understanding of calling each other afterwards like, "Acha, we are fought, but these two things don't choo-choo, just do it." And he will say, don't these two choo-choo things, you don't choo-choo, and just do it, and we agree to this thing. And in the background, it doesn't happen in public, because in public it's a fierce battle, right? And people are like mostly disturbed, like, oh shit, is he on a ship or not? Like, because we have not come to a conclusion. I think some people are just extraordinary at doing some of these things, and counterintuitive on many, many things. And they will not have data. They would just be right. For example, I made an hypothesis with Harish, and I have not told him yet. He's going to scream at me when I tell him this. I told him, Harish, yaar, ye koi above 40-year-old scroll nahi karta. It's a very young person's behavior. So we make all these apps where people scroll. It is stupid. We should stop this. For above 40, we should make a separate app. And he's like, Kunal, I am telling you, I look at my dad, he scrolls all day long. It'll be the exact opposite. And by the way, none of us have the data. So I obviously reach out to team, and that's why my team gets all these queries, because like, ye kyun pooch raha hai question? It's the exact opposite. It's an inverse correlation to age of scrolling. And I would have never guessed this. And neither he had any data point to believe this. He just said, I saw my dad, and he will generalize from that. But if you talk to most engineers, but we can't believe in anecdote, we have to look at data, and the guy doesn't look at data. I've tried so many times to tell Harish to look at data. It doesn't work. But there is something that makes us work together. And I think that's an interesting way of combining these beliefs and doing better. I'm not saying that there's room for improvement. There is obviously room for improvement. We'll have our blind spots, and you have to be very truth-seeking to find your blind spots and become better. That's where the compounding nature of knowledge comes in. But it works. I'm going to switch to one more controversial topic.
Actually, hold on. So you mentioned data. That's an interesting one. So consider this. Uh, when I share now something like, oh, this is, maybe it's something like, this is a way to improve product quality. I'm sharing it in the context of me writing it publicly, but this happens on Teams as well. So even if you don't write publicly, you will experience this. You're talking about, okay, how do we improve product quality? There'll always be a few people in the room or on Twitter who'll chime in with like, but wait, how do you measure product quality? How can you measure that these steps will work? And how can you measure that these steps will actually improve product quality? And I'll share a couple of observations about this phenomenon, because this is universal. And it wastes a lot of time and makes teams make bad choices often. When somebody in a room or anywhere asks, but what metrics do you have to justify this? What they are doing by asking that question is they have immediately, with those few words that they uttered, they have elevated themselves. All of a sudden now, all of us in the meeting are thinking, this person is really smart. Kya question hai? And then, what happens to us when this question gets raised? We feel like we need to be on the defensive. And then we have to respond in kind. We have to respond with, yeah, okay, you're right. Like, we need to think about what metrics we'll use to measure if this worked, if this process worked, if this approach worked, if this feature worked. So what have you done now? Because somebody essentially wanted to elevate themselves in some conversation somewhere, which doesn't matter, it's a stupid game. We're now going to do extra work. And this is just one example. This shows up all the time. I have a name for this phenomenon called apple pie positions, which is basically everybody loves apple pie, whatever. But the point is, it's a position that you take that is hard for somebody to argue against, but is often the wrong answer, right? And one of the things that I want more people to understand is that it is okay not to measure everything. In fact, judgment, you spoke about judgment earlier. Judgment, real judgment, lies in what to measure and what not to measure, right? A lot of what has happened in America, and I think therefore in many other parts of the world, with kind of product management and product work and software work, is that we think we need to measure everything. And if we're not measuring everything, then we're stupid, we're wrong, right? Or we need to justify everything with data. So when people say, oh, everything needs to be measured, I want to ask you a few questions. Do you measure other important things in your life? For instance, do you measure your performance as a parent, for those of you who are parents? What metrics do you use?
I know a couple of people who have built an OKR sheet for their parent
There
also.
you go, okay.
I feel sad for them though.
There is, how are you measuring, what is your metric for whether you are a good partner? Does anybody have a metric for that? Who has a partner here? Raise your hands. Okay, so a lot of people, right? Any of you have a metric for whether you're a good partner? Okay, nobody's raising their hand, so I assume nobody has a metric. Does that mean that being a good partner is not important for you? Because, hey, you're not measuring it. So how can you improve it? How can you become a better partner if you're not measuring it?
I think that's why marriage was invented. कि measure तो नहीं कर पाएंगे, पर lock in कर देते हैं.
Lock in. Switching costs बढ़ा देते हैं.
Yeah.
So the overall point is that there are many things in life that are very important that we don't measure. And yet, when it comes to work situations, all of a sudden, apple pie position, what are the success metrics? How do you know that product quality improved? So here's the truth. The truth is, with these things you just know. When I asked you, like, what is the quality of your relationship with your partner? You don't have to measure it. You know. You feel it, you experience it. And it's okay. It's okay in certain cases in work situations to go with that. So anyway, that's my rant on data and metrics
No,
and
that's
quality.
fine. It's fine. It's a useful one. We've gone all over the place. I have a lot of questions that the team has made nice as a card bana ke. Can a project manager transition to product manager with hard work?
There are two aspects to this, right? There's the question that was asked, which is, can you transition into product management or can you make people a product manager? Yeah, surely you can. Surely you can, right? But what does that mean? It means that you have a title. You have a title that you are a product manager at some company somewhere. So some company somewhere gave you the job and title of product management. Is that possible? Yeah, absolutely it is possible. The bigger question is, why? Why do you want to become a product manager? What are you going to bring to the role? What is your differentiator that's going to make you very good at what you do? And that's a question that doesn't get asked enough. A lot of people, founders, product leaders, they come to me and they ask me, Shreyas, I want to do this. How can I do it? And sometimes there's a worse version of this question, which is, I am in this situation. What would you do if you were in my place? And by the way, again, in America, this is a very common way of framing what would you do. I don't know why people do it, but so then I have to say, like, okay, hold on. First of all, this is the wrong question. It doesn't matter what I would do if I were in your place, because we are two different people, right? So that why of the product manager thing is more important. And so I'll reframe the question to, can everybody be a great product manager? Absolutely not. I think some people can, no matter what they do, they can never be great product managers. Can everybody be good product managers? Many people can. But I don't know. I haven't done any kind of formal survey on analysis, but I would say maybe less than 50%, but more than 20% of people can be good product managers with hard work and other things. But the more important question is, what is their real strength? Like, you should think about things, especially as you get more advanced in your career, in terms of opportunity cost, right? So to become this product manager, to have this title, what are you giving up, right? Like, that difference is opportunity cost, right? And I think sometimes people make the wrong choice. They become product managers, and then it becomes sunk cost. Okay, now I'm product manager, so I need to stay product manager. The title looks great on LinkedIn, etc. And I see, a sizable number of people for whom product management was the wrong career, but somehow they ended up in it. And one of the things about product management is everybody thinks, once, like, I'll try it out and then afterwards I'll escape it. I also thought that when I went from engineering to product management. But I rapidly became useless in anything else. And I just couldn't go back to be an engineer. Luckily, in my case, it ended up being the right choice, but sometimes that happens as well. So It's useful to kind of think about that why.
Yeah, I often say this: resumes are prisons, uh, which we assign to ourselves and rob ourselves the opportunity of becoming whatever the hell we should be becoming, uh, or what we are good at. Okay, what are some of the non-intuitive traits you've seen in great product thinkers? This is from Kavya at FreeWap.
There are a few. I want to call out one particularly, which is they can simulate. They can simulate thought processes of other people extremely well. And furthermore, they can also simulate situations, which is like, okay, we have this hard product problem, this is solution A, but it has these issues, and the solution B, and it has these other issues, solution C, let's talk about it, etc., etc. One thing I've noticed about really great product people is they can kind of simulate, okay, if we do solution A, these are the effects it'll have on users, on regulators, on partners, on competitors. If we do solution B, these are the effects on go to market, on support volume,
Second
or
order
whatever.
thinking.
Second, third order thinking. But to do that, right? Like, like if I wrote some tweet about second order thinking, like I'll get a lot of likes, but it's kind of useless because the problem is that in order to do it effectively, there is no framework. What you have to be able to do is you have to be able to build and practice this skill of figuring out how people will react, people you've never talked to. And by the way, you cannot talk to everybody, right? Like, it's just impossible to talk to everybody and figure it out, right? So, people you've not talked to, people you don't even understand, like, sort of, you don't quite know exactly, say you're building a support tool, right? Like, now you don't exactly know how the VP of support at company A will work versus VP of support at company B, right? So there is this idea of this model you need to have in your head. That model informs how these different people will react to these different situations. And again, a lot of that, some people are just naturally great at it. But this is one of those things, we talked about like earlier about, to be world class at something, according to me, the biggest factor is natural talent, right? But to be good at something, you can get good at it, right? And if you get good at simulation, you will differentiate yourself from 95% of other product managers who don't do it. They follow the approach of chalo try karte, we'll try this, let's see what happens. Oh, and then they'll measure the thing and they're like, oh, this did not work. Okay, let's try this other thing. 5, 6 iterations, right? Like, those who do simulation will usually, not always, usually arrive at the right answer at the first go.
Um, I'll add a couple of them. They usually have correct hypothesis before looking at any data. They do not arrive at hypothesis through data. Uh, and you can give them in any situation. So I tried to find out what is the early indicators of second order thinking. Can you actually train for that? And actually, I found an interesting pattern. Uh, all the kids who were trained through strategy games early on in childhood became good at second order thinking. And it's surprising how many kids have not played strategy games. They were in physical sport, which are not really requiring second, third order thinking on playing games. So I've seen second order thinking to be having a strong correlation in that. The third is a natural ability to know what will cause applause. Like they just know that this people will just talk about it and appreciate it. Will talk about it in reviews and that I have seen a strong correlation in early performance arts. If they've done some performance arts early in their life, They just know what will cause applause in the audience. Has an unusual trait. The last one is just curiosity. They just have this unusual curiosity uh, that almost feels like they're wasting time. Like, all of us have been taunted in our childhood that अगर इतना दिमाग पढ़ाई में लगाता तो marks आते थे, right? And somehow these deviants, variants have managed to not give up on that randomness, and the randomness is finding patterns, and they go wide and deep both to find patterns. Some people have just insanely high processing power. Some people can operate in ambiguous situations better with and maybe it's a different kind of processing power to do that. Uh, Last one actually is somehow have lesser shame than others. They're more shameless. They just tend to not worry about shame as a big factor, which stops them from asking from help, checking this, trying this, having an opinion, looking like an idiot. I think there is an interesting pattern, and India is cursed with that. I think India's biggest reason of not having extraordinary product culture is because truth seeking is ridiculed. If you ask a dumb question, they're like, "Kya yaar?" And they're like, we have this mocking culture where unless you really don't feel the mockery, which like I don't feel mockery. I was like, "Nee, but tell me no, but tell me no. You can mock me later, but tell me no, and tell me no." And I think some people just power through that. Most people are like, "Boss, I've been negatively reinforced. I'm not gonna be curious because I get mocked for asking stupid questions." And we all knew that, but we still don't. We are curious about many things we don't ask. And our compounding is slow because of that. Now you've advised companies in India. Tell me the top 5 disturbing realizations that you've had about India.
Couple of things come to mind. I don't think I can get to 5, but a couple of things come to mind. One is I've noticed that there is a very high PM to Eng ratio among companies in India.
Talk numbers.
Sometimes I've noticed like there is 1 PM for 2 engineers, 1 PM for 3 engineers, that sort of thing. 1 to 5 is also quite common. That is not something I'm used to. And by the way, like again, the ratio is not the problem, right? The problem is, what are these people doing? So that's one. Another one.
What should it be?
What's that?
What should it be for a consumer company?
I think a healthy ratio with a lot of caveats, okay? But a healthy ratio is somewhere between 1:8 to 1:20. And how do you end up on the 20 side of that spectrum? How do you end up on the 8 side of that spectrum? It starts getting into it depends on your situation.
Or stage of 0 to 1 or
stage?
10 to
Is it
100?
infrastructure? That. So there are many factors at play. But that is the rough range that's a healthy ratio. And again, I don't have a problem with the ratio. But the problem is, why is this happening? Right? So if you have a lot of PMs, what are they doing? And how much ownership and understanding do engineers have of what is getting built and why it is getting built? And how much input do engineers have into what's getting built? And how much busy work is being created because we PMs, we are great at making ourselves busy, but because we don't like produce any concrete artifact, the way we make ourselves busy is by making other people busy. And so those are the problems I have, not necessarily the ratio. The ratio is just a symptom of something deeper that I like to investigate.
It's a good one. I'm going to wrap with one question. What would you tell folks, and there are founders over here, there are senior product leaders over here. what can they do to really accelerate their product chops? They can watch Twitter, do this. What are the very concrete accelerants that you can give them, including to know that I'm terrible at this and I should do something else in life? What are the few things that you can recommend in terms of books, courses, career choices? For example, I realized that fastest way to know if you're a good PM or not, founder ban jao. Like, tack, you'll be out because you will have no chance to survive a bad product. So, what are the few things that you can give as a catalyst to them to get to their eventual zone of becoming a great PM slash founder, or just going back to doing something else, or changing their methods?
Understand what kind of PM or PM leader you are and accept it. So I have this simple framework of there. I've noticed 3 patterns of PM leaders. There's the craftsperson, there's the operator, and then there's the visionary. So which one are you? And there's no right or wrong that, okay, this one is better than this, so I want to be that. Like, just be honest with yourself, evaluate it. Once you understand that, now you have a better roadmap. Because what you want to do, again, because a lot of this stuff is, whether you like it or not, or whether you accept it or not, there is a reason why you are a visionary, or there is a strong reason why you are a craftsperson, right? So just like for our products, we say we need to focus on our strengths, build on our strengths, create differentiation, etc., etc. In a sense, you are the product here, right? So whatever that is, like say you're a craftsperson archetype, you want to really build that strength, right? Like you want to convert that strength to a superpower. So that's one aspect of something concrete that you do, is first at least identify this, right? Most people go through their entire PM lives not understanding this. And then they struggle, which is like, oh, took this head of product management job, it worked out well, but then I took this next one and I got fired. Or I couldn't get along with the CEO, right? Well, there's a reason actually why you couldn't get along with the CEO, and a lot of it has to do with this archetype. So that's one. Second, make sure that you convert your liabilities into non-liabilities, right? So I mentioned that, like, say you're a craftsperson, okay, focus on being a great craftsperson, because that's how you'll differentiate yourself. That's how when the work you do will feel like magic. If you're an operator, get better at that. But if something else is your liability, because PM is a very generalist role, you cannot have that liability. If you're an engineer and you're great at front-end engineering but horrible at back-end engineering, the advice is different, which is like, fine, forget back-end engineering, right? There's enough front-end engineering to do. Like, just focus, make that your strength. PM doesn't work that way because it's a very generalist role, right? So understand, I'm not saying convert the liability into a superpower. I'm saying make your liability a non-liability. So instead of being bottom 20%, like be bottom 50%, right? So that's another one. And then the question is, well, but how do I do this, right? How do I figure this out? You need to understand and embrace your learning style, right? Which is like, do you learn by reading or listening? Do you learn by doing, or do you learn by shadowing? Right? Just embrace it. Because like, yeah, Shreyas can offer you book recommendations, and then you buy the books, but you don't read them. And then you feel guilty that you didn't read these books. And then the next month I'll offer more book suggestions. And now you're feeling even more stressed. Maybe reading is not your learning style, right? So learn by doing. Okay, so how do you learn by doing? Well, put yourselves in situations where you're forced to do that. Right? Like, there's so much knowledge out there, right? Like, just look everywhere. Everything is a product problem. Everything. Right? So, concretely, if you want to understand this product sense thing, and reading is not your thing, because if reading is your thing, I'll recommend Alchemy by Rory Sutherland, which has nothing to do with product management, but it'll improve your product sense. But say reading is not your thing, or listening to the audiobook is not your thing, Well, do teardowns of products, right? But don't do teardowns for the sake of telling other people you did teardowns, or for the sake of writing a thread on Twitter on teardowns, right? Because then you're not doing it for the right reason. Like, look at any product that's successful. Try to just, without talking to anybody, try to figure out, right? Why is it working? Why is it successful? And don't, there's some mention of labels. Don't try to look for some intellectual answers that you can share with others to look smart. A lot of times people do that. It's bullshit. Like, just do it for yourself. Okay? Now, if it helps, do it with a group. But my point is, you need to do these things for yourself, right? So, this is all hard work. This means if you're going to do this, you're not doing something else. Right? And so that's the other part, which is like, the only way you can sustain this in the long run is if you either already have, or if you don't have it, you develop a love for the craft. So that would be my last tip, right? Like, you need to get to a place where you develop a love for the craft. I will tell you something that is not popular. If I write it on Twitter, 50 people will come after me, which is why I won't write it on Twitter, because I don't.
This is exactly why you should write on Twitter.
What's that?
That people will come after you. What's the point of living?
No, I hate that stuff. I want to keep my life calm. Remember, I'm an accidental writer. Like, I didn't sign up for this thing. So I don't want it to take over and whatever. Anyway, the point is, this is very important. If you are not thinking about your craft in your free time, you are very likely not going to be extremely successful at that craft. Right? Like, this should be things you're thinking about. Like, when, like, nobody's forcing you. You're in the bus going somewhere, you're thinking about this. Right? Every person who's really good at something is doing this. How do they do this? Well, some of it is, again, like, they can't help it. But it comes from love. Love of the craft. Right? So develop that love.
Mathematically speaking, 50% of you will not make it. And he's given you a framework to figure out how you will know that. But it is honestly a craft. Building a company is unfortunately also a craft. And many founders tap out at different levels, and some people keep going on and keep building new things and scaling to greater levels. They are all learning machines, and they absolutely love. And one final myth that Shreyas and I have discussed, people who are really good at something, trust me, the number of hours they work is not 40 hours a week. They are doing it all the time, and they take breaks to do other things in life. And therefore, the hours that they actually put in their craft is insane. And therefore, our standard view on what work-life balance and all of these things that we've learned from the Western world while being a country with $2,000 per capita income is unfortunate. We have not become great at our craft, but we've taken every word from the Western world and started to live those words when we have achieved nothing in excellence. On that happy note, Shreyas, thank you so much for doing this. Always fun. Guys, he's going to be around for a bit. Spend some time. I'll be around as well. Try to not just talk to us. You've heard most of the stuff that we are talking about.
Are we doing any audience questions?
We can. I mean, there are a lot of audience questions, but we can continue more questions.
Like live questions?
Yeah, we can do live questions. The cameras are not ready for that.
Are people up for it, or do
no,
we
it's okay. We can do without planning. One thing I will just say though is my request when we break is our biggest curse as a country is the worship culture. So two people who have more status, people will gather around them and listen to their pravachan, and all of them become some godmen only. We have to discourage that. There is learning in each of you. Try to get more curious and stop trying to find these universal truth sources. Otherwise, Shreyas' business will going to do very well, by the way, but may not be the right thing for you. He's around, but more questions from the audience.
Yeah, I want to add one more thing to this, which is there are dozens upon dozens of people I know who are fabulous, who are world class at product management and product work in general. You have likely not heard of any of them, right? So just because I sit here before you, it doesn't mean that, like, you know, I need to be elevated to some level. If that COVID accident hadn't happened, you would not know me. How many of you had heard of me in 2015? Okay, one person. How did you hear of me in 2015? Yes, yes, the SVPMA video. I did something a while back. Thank you for being one of the 20 people who watched that video. Um, so does that mean that in 2015 I was a bad product manager? I was an excellent product manager in 2015.
Shreyas, you've come on CRED Curious now, so you're gonna be like even more popular, more worship coming your way. Get ready for that. You're getting addicted to it slowly.
I dread those things.
Okay, get more questions from the audience. We'll take a few.
Do you think there are some people who simply won't be world class at anything?
I don't know. I'm still searching for an answer to that question. And I'm doing it in the context of being a parent. Not that I have expectations of my child being world class at anything, because that's the best way to ensure that that doesn't happen. But it's still an interesting thing I'm exploring, because I want to help my son identify things that he will enjoy doing, things which he will do not because it's work, things that he will pursue just for the sheer joy of it. And I think this joy thing is very important in life, because the joy helps you overcome the tough parts of any job or any endeavor. So anyway, I don't know the exact answer to your question. I do believe that people do have innate capacity to be really great at a small set of things, and it's important for you to figure out what that set of things is. Because again, the point is, I did talk about world class because that's easily identifiable. You can kind of, I can use examples like Sachin Tendulkar. But the point is, we don't have to be world class. That's like a bonus, right? But you got to identify what you're great at. And can somebody be great at a particular thing? I do believe yes. Other questions?
Hi Shreyas, I'm Uday. I wanted to ask you, what was your experience working with Patrick Collison at Stripe?
So when I started at Stripe, it was obviously it was smaller than it is now. So I spent quite a bit of time working with Patrick on various product things. The thing I enjoyed most, frankly, about working with Patrick is he has this incredible product sense. And I happen to, in my case, I happen to sort of, product sense is my superpower as well. So that was really fun, because in any environment, I don't care what environment it is, you will find more people who are strongest at execution sense. Then the next most common is people who are strongest at analytical sense. And product sense is the least common in any environment. And so when you find somebody else who is great at that, you're able to make a lot of progress very quickly. You don't have to go through the 50, 60 analytical arguments and blah, blah, blah. You just keep going. You make massive progress within, say, a 15-minute discussion, which, in a more kind of hybrid group might take 3, 4, 5, 6 meetings, right? So that was the part I enjoyed a lot. And obviously there was a lot of learning I did from observing Patrick. But then I found that like I actually kind of like observe everybody and like learn a lot from them. Uh, Again, I'm not taking any credit for it. I was actually kind of born that way. So I did learn a lot from Patrick as well. Uh, and then the last thing I'll say is, he really embodied this idea that whatever values you are sharing with the company about how you should be, he lived those values. And I know it sounds like a cliche, but it's really hard to do at scale for a founder. Right? So even when Stripe was very large, he did the best possible job he could to stay very close to the customer. Right? And not just like, oh, I am the CEO, so I'll talk to the CEO of the customer. No. Like he would go talk to the support team members at the customer's side to understand how the Stripe dashboard is working or not working for them. Right? And then he would share like some of his findings and whatnot. So like kind of that, like one of the things I learned is like as a leader, it is very difficult to do once you have this leadership job, but it's so important because when you do that, people just realize what it takes to be successful here. Right? The leader can go up at all hands and say 50 times like all of us need to do this. But if you actually see the leader doing it, it's so much more powerful. So those would be a few things I would share.
I think the interesting point is all companies are mirror images of their founders. People don't realize that, but all the good, bad, ugly comes from that, and all evolution also comes from founders' evolution. If the founder doesn't evolve, the company will not evolve. And like I said, the all hands thing doesn't change anything unless you really care about this and you show your time spent increasing on that. The company will not change. They will just mimic you on many ways. In fact, if they've come from an organization which did that really well also, even they will change and become like you in that company.
Thanks a lot.
Next, right here on the left, or my left.
Decade ago, when you evaluated starting your own company, have you revisited that question from an opportunity cost point of view as you think about teaching and writing online? And as a second part of that question, who are the kind of PMs who become good founders or succeed in that? Are there traits that make them more likely to succeed? How do you evaluate that? And the reason I ask is you've worked with so many founders, you've been there, done that, at least to some extent from my eyes. What's stopping you from doing something on your own?
Every aspect of my childhood and my early kind of 20s, I just knew that I was going to start a company. That this is my destiny, this is my future. I came from a family where every male had started their own business. And so I just grew up in that kind of, again, very kind of Gujarati, Bombay sort of family. And a lot of people I know are surprised that I've never founded a company. Or at least founded a venture-backed company. And the answer is interesting in that what I realized in my mid-30s is that I've actually got a lot of the joy of founding from actually working at other companies, like being an employee at other companies. Which is that, again, and this is not something I chose, so I can take zero credit for it, but I was somehow wired to always think about myself as the owner of any company I worked at. So even at Google, right, which had tens of thousands of people, 10,000+ people when I joined, I just thought about myself as kind of the owner of Google. And so that's how I would operate, that's how I do my work, etc., etc. And so that like founder mindset was just there. And when you have the founder mindset, you can actually get an outlet for that, even if you're working in sort of like a place like Google or whatever else. um, which is that I did some things differently. Like I didn't focus a lot on optics because as a founder, you don't focus on optics of like, oh, who likes me and all of that stuff. You just do work, right? You focus on the craft, you focused on results. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is this founder mindset manifests in larger companies where like I didn't follow rules as much. You know, whatever implicit or explicit rules there are of like, oh, you must do this process to get this launch out, whatever, whatever. Guess what? When you're founder mindset, you don't follow those rules. In fact, I would contend that the founders of the very companies that set up the rules, they themselves don't follow rules. Like founders hate rules. Right? That doesn't mean you break rules for the sake of breaking rules, and please don't break laws. Laws are different from rules. So those are just some couple of examples of like, I used to have a lot of fun doing all this, and there was an outlet. Now the remainder part, there are two parts remaining, right? One is the glory and the money and whatever else that comes out of being a founder. And another one, it's kind of related, but it's kind of like, because I called it out earlier, is like what your family thinks of you, right? So that, I realized that I did not need. When I was like 35, so I was more mature than say when I was 25 or 30, I realized that like I'm happy in life where I am. So will I found a venture-backed company at some point? Maybe. I remain open to that possibility. But I don't want to do it for the sake of doing it, because a lot of the joy I've had, and I'm happy. And last thing I'll say on that point is like, I realized a couple of years ago that there is no such thing as happier. Okay, and there is a big problem in society. A lot of problems we create for ourselves is because we want to be happier. So at some point, like when I was 40, I realized that if I'm happy, I'm happy. That's it. I'm not going to try to do other things with the hope or expectation that I'll get happier, because guess what? If I do that, I'm actually guaranteeing that I'll be less happy, right? So there are many things in life that are not binary. Most things in life are not binary, they're a continuum. But the most important things in life, I feel, are actually binary. So if you're happy, it's just happy. Don't try to be happier. So that's more of a, I guess, a philosophical reason why
As a
not.
person who has been an employee before and founder later in life, I agree with happier not being a concept, but it's definitely way more exciting being a founder, because you almost die every day. And you start loving it. Number one. Shreyas doesn't realize he's already a founder thanks to you. You are a super follower. That's a founder. You just don't say that yet because it's not crafted in that way, but you are making money on your own without any venture backing, bootstrapped into this in a platform. So to me, that's as founder as it gets. Shreyas is around. Ask him more questions. Become a super follower so that he can realize he's become a founder. And I would say that the content on that is great. I was a super follower for a month. Then India banned the recurring card transaction, and I'm like, I have not figured that out how to make that work. So I have not done that yet. Hopefully, Elon will solve that. But Shreyas, thank you so much for doing this. I hope you had fun. I'm sure you'll have a good time chatting with the team, and thank you for doing what you do for the Indian ecosystem, sometimes consciously, sometimes not so consciously. We need more people to share. Unfortunately, culturally, we don't share. We are probably 150 unicorn founders, and barely anybody says anything because they're mostly worried about what will people think about what they share, and honestly, nobody gives a damn. And good that you're doing that. I would strongly recommend that keep doing that. I've texted you multiple times that, Shreyas, maybe not enough people tell you this, but you should keep sharing this because it forces people to think and question. and only thing I would request is that do not agree with anything what I am saying or he's saying for the sake of it. That's not your role. Your role is to kind of use these lenses to look at things differently and hopefully arrive at your own conclusions, which will be valid for a short period of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for listening and thanks for being here.